Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 2024 edition of the St. Louis Java Users Group. For those who don't know, the St. Louis Java Users Group is an informal group. We had our first meeting in May of 1997, so we've been around for quite a while. We're not the oldest Java Users Group, but we're definitely up there. Attendance is free. There's no formal membership list. Our normal meeting date is the second Thursday of each month, except December when there is no meeting. There's just too many things going on over the holidays for us to be able to organize a meeting in December. And when we're back to meeting in person, and we're finally back, you can join us for food and social at 6 p.m. And we try to get the meeting started at about 6:30, as long as the AV gods are cooperating. And when we meet in person, this broadcast, or whatever you want to call this Zoom meeting, is originating from the Object Computing Incorporated training room. And we're at 12,140 Woodcrest Executive Drive, Suite 310, that's on the third floor. And of course, we're in St. Louis, Missouri. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce the other members of the St. Louis Java Users Group Steering Committee. So from left to right, we have Zach Klein, Ted Doyle, Robert Levitt, Wei Chi Gao, and Bruce Allspoil, that's me. You can meet, huh? That's right. I plan it that way intentionally. Yes, I do. I have this shirt, which I wear for computer meetings. I'm very consistent in that. You can reach all of us on the steering committee if you send an email to that address that's at the bottom of your screen there. That's javasigsc@ociweb.com. Okay, next slide. The St. Louis Java Users Group would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. So Object Computing Incorporated is our lead sponsor. They have been with us since 1997, and they're supplying the training room and filling in all kinds of things like the Zoom subscription and the meetup fees and things like that. They've been helpful. JFrog has also sponsored Zoom subscriptions and so forth in the past. At the end of the meeting, we will be conducting a raffle. And if you're watching the recording, I'm sorry, you're too late. You must be present to win, either online or virtually, either 2 JetBrains licenses, which we will be raffling, and we will also raffle 2 Manning ebooks of your choice at the end of the meeting. So you'll want to stick around. So what we'll do is we'll stop the recording and then we'll go into the raffle after that. Okay, next sponsor. So for those of us who are present in the room, you're enjoying some fantastic pizza that has been sponsored for us by Tech Systems, and they're a recruiting agency. And he's here. You want to come over, and would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about Tech Systems and the openings that you're looking to fill?
Absolutely.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. So hello, everybody. My name is Jake Luthi. I'm a Java specialized recruiter with Tech Systems. So Tech Systems, I'm sure some of you are familiar in this room here, but Tech Systems, we are the market leader in IT staffing and solutioning. So what we do is we align candidates with current job openings and help them all the way out through the process. We're with our candidates from day one of submittal to interview process to walking in, making sure everything is all good on the job, making sure that everybody's happy with their role, and so on and so forth. So what I do is reach out to candidates, much like yourself, help them find what they're looking for from a compensation perspective, company perspective, whatever you might be looking for. I do my best to align what you're looking for with what we have to offer. So go over some of our top clients. Some of our top clients right now are Centene. They're a healthcare insurance provider. We also do a lot of work with Edward Jones in the financial space, and MasterCard. So those are 3 of the top clients that we support. I also support our Midwest market. So I sit on a team that's based out of Milwaukee that supports our Midwest market from Chicago to Ohio, Detroit, all around the Missouri area, and do the same thing, help them align with what they do. And basically, you know, I know, as many of you know, job market is not great right now, but if anybody is, interested in partnering with me for your job search, I cannot promise that I will get you a job in a few weeks or a few days or whatever that might be. I can promise at Tech Systems, we take pride in being fully transparent throughout the process, giving as much information as possible, and helping out our consultants as much as we possibly can. So if anybody's interested in connecting, having a conversation, my information is by the door. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, reach out. We can schedule a phone call, coffee, lunch, whatever you prefer, and talk about what you might be looking for and see if I might be able to help. So if anybody's interested, please reach out and I will be happy to speak with you.
Okay, and so if anybody has a resume they'd like to give to you, they can do that here before you take off.
Sure.
Okay, all right, so don't run away too fast. Okay.
Would you say the current job market is worse than 2001 and 2009?
I have not been recruiting for that long, so I cannot say that. But I can say it's a lot worse than it was in 2001, not 2001, 2021 and 2022. We're starting to see things pick back up a little bit, but it's been fairly slow right now.
All right, any other questions for our recruiter? Well, thank you very much for coming by and the pizza and everything, and I really hope we'll see you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
Thank you. All right, next slide. Further announcements, I mentioned that Manning is one of our sponsors. So we have a discount code. If you'd like to buy a Manning ebook, 40% off any product, the discount code is JUG13. Now, we've got a conference coming up, and we need to talk about that. It'll be the Forge Software Engineering Conference on October 7th, and it'll be here in St. Louis, Missouri. And would you like to tell us some more about the conference and what you have planned?
Sure, absolutely. So for those who don't know me, my name is Andy Montgomery, here with Object Computing as well. So interesting fun fact is that this is my first time back at the Jug in 18 years. I was a regular member for many, many years and on the mailing list that we used to give out all the time. So, but tonight I'm here to talk about Forge. As you all know, and you've been in the market for a while, I've been in town. We've had a number of really great conferences over the years in software development. And with some of those ending in the last year or so, like we see this as an opportunity to give back. So one of the core values that Object Computing has is to share it back and share it back with the community in many different ways. And one way we thought would be really exciting to do that is in the software development space. And so this conference is the first of a series of conferences that we'll be sort of coordinating with partners to basically bring that conversation around software development back into more of a formal conference format. It'll be October 7th, as Bruce said. I'll be here at the Holiday Inn just down the street here from our office space. That we'll have a number of speakers. So the first session is more like a symposium. We'll have a keynote that'll kick off after sort of inclusive with a lunch. The keynote is Neil Ford. Many of you probably know him as a leading architect, author, and many very seasoned presenter in this ecosystem. He's going to talk about how architecture is having to evolve in a very complex world that we all live in. And so, and then we'll have 3 other great speakers that will come after him. And then we'll have some other activities throughout the day. So if you want to learn more about Forge, forgestl.io is our URL. Check it out. If you have questions, you want to learn more, you can also reach out to some of the members that are part of this Jug, or I'll provide my information. You guys can reach out to me directly. So thank you very much.
All right, next slide. Further announcements. You probably remember Venkat from last time. He is actually running a conference of his own, September 30th through October 2nd. And we've got a $50 Jug discount code on that conference. So if you're interested in that one, you can just go to that address on your screen or scan the little barcode here. It's dev2next.com if you want to get more information on that. Okay, next slide. As far as upcoming presentations go, next month we'll have increased performance and developer productivity with Jakarta EE11. Ivar Grimstead is coming all the way across the Atlantic to give this one, well, not just this one. He's going to do some other jugs too, I think. But yes, we've had this one in the works here for a long time, and he's actually with the Eclipse Foundation and a developer advocate there. So you can find out what's happening with what used to be Java EE is now Jakarta EE, if you want to get the updates. All right, next. So if you want to keep up with our presentation schedule, that's easy to do. Just go to the Meetup website, meetup.com/gatewayjug. And as soon as we get our meetings scheduled, we post them there, and you can go ahead and RSVP on that to get a reminder when the meeting is coming up. We are recording these presentations. If you'd like to see the recordings, I have them up on my personal YouTube channel. So there's the URL right there. If you'd like to give a presentation, or if you'd like to become a JUG sponsor, you can just email the steering committee at that same address that I gave you before. That's javasigsc@ociweb.com. So I think we're getting close. Go to the next slide. All right. So now we're ready for the main event. After all that introduction to Spring AI. So that's Steve Mitchell of Ahead. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my microphone so that you can turn on yours, and you can take it away.
Look. Can everybody hear me? Yep, I can hear me. All right, so as Bruce said, I'm Steve Mitchell. I'm from Ahead. We've got a couple of Aheadians back there. Raise your hands. Ahead's based out of Chicago. They're from St. Louis. I'm from Kansas City. Drove over for this event, and thank you for having me. Who here has heard Deshaun Carter speak at Spring IO? You have? So we're friends. I am not Deshaun Carter. I don't speak like he does. He's fantastic to hear. We went to lunch a couple months ago, and I mentioned I'm a consultant, so I don't get to control what I work on. And I mentioned I have not done any Spring AI engagements with Ahead, and a couple of weeks later, he called and basically dared me to do Spring AI for the Java users group in Kansas City. So that's kind of how I started down this road. That URL at the bottom is where I'm doing the work on the project. It's alive. It'll be, we'll be sharing the presentation. So yeah, you'll be able to get it out of the presentation down the road. But yeah, the project in GitHub is Byteworks Home Lab, BYTEWRKS Home Lab, and it's Spring-AI-Lab. So what I'll cover tonight is kind of level set with AI and how it might affect your jobs, all of our jobs. We will go into the Spring AI integration that's been released. We're going to spend some time on Ollama. Who's heard of Ollama? That one in the back. So Ollama, we'll cover it. So it's basically a platform like Docker desktop, except for LLMs instead of containers. We'll be doing demos kind of spread out through tonight, and all of those are in that lab project, and you can go in and check those out and fork it and make it better and play with it. And we'll wrap up with a conclusion. So are we ready to go? So generative AI, you guys have been around since '97, so you've seen some of these. It's like this was planned this way. 78 personal computers, there were supercomputers at universities. There were $5 million mainframes, but you had a desktop calculator. That was the compute you had. So 78 with personal computers, we solved the compute problem. We made compute very affordable and everywhere. World Wide Web solved distribution. So now there was a way, if you had your 1200 baud modem, you could get data from all these different sources. 2008, mobile came, and suddenly that compute and that data was widely available any place you had signal. And now 2022, we have creative intelligence that we can, describe an image and have it generated. You can describe a problem you're trying to code and have your code generated. You can ask for help on your resume or your brochure and have it generated. So it's the biggest of all of these, and it's gonna impact all of our jobs and hopefully in a positive way. It really got started in 2017 with a paper from 6 people from Google called Attention is All You Need. And it introduced a new architecture, transformers, and you had encoders and decoders that could be stacked. And I'm not a computer scientist. I can't describe the paper to you, but that is the catalyst that set things off. So transformers, they replaced what was the predominant architecture that had been used for machine learning for years. And the big change was they were parallel. So it dramatically increased scalability and the performance needed to do the sequence modeling. And up until that point, models were small and task specific. And now with the parallel processing, you could do very, very large general models. And that's what led to GPT. The attention mechanism, I'll show you a couple of examples of using that in a bit. But this was revolutionary and spurred all kinds of R&D. 5 of these 6 authors started AI companies. And the models 2022 started coming out. ChatGPT was the big splash, and most people have touched ChatGPT. DALL-E gets a lot of press because it's pretty cool. You describe an image and it generates the image. Mistral and Codex were trained on code snippets. So those are the ones that will affect our jobs. And you can be a pessimist about it, or you can be an optimist about it. I don't think they're replacing our jobs. I think as the IDEs do more and more integration with AI, it's going to be, you'll be a coding superhero. If you can think about it and describe it, you're going to get the code and hopefully you're just faster. T5 is text-to-text generation. That one does well with translations. We'll be using Llama 3 tonight, and there's countless other models. Any questions so far? All right, so these large language models have some limitations. It takes them months to train, and then they have to be fine-tuned and then eventually put in production. So the data could be, months or maybe a year old by the time you get it. So you can't ask it about who won the Olympic events, right? If they don't know about the Olympic events, unless someone's providing that data, and we'll be talking about that later. They're stateless. When you ask your questions, you don't change that LLM. So they can't, out of the box, they can't hold a conversation. They can't maintain the state of a conversation. So if you want that, you have to provide it. And Spring AI gives you a way to do that. They're not trained on your data. So all of your corporate proprietary information, if you want to use an LLM with that, you've got to bring it to the LLM. They're limited in size. So the prompts that you send in can have about 4,000 tokens, so a couple of pages of text, and you're going to get back that limited size as well. And they're prone to hallucinations. They're generative. They're creative. They create things out of thin air. So if you don't tell it, do not answer. If you don't know the answer, you're going to get some random made up thing. So you don't want that. You got to code for that. We're all Java developers here. We all use databases. We're all good at writing SQL, structured query language. And prompts are the SQL for AI, but they're unstructured. You can do a little structure with them because they support Markdown language. So in this prompt, we've got a markdown header. That's a system role. So you're telling the AI how to answer your question. You're given instructions on how to answer your question. So in this case, you're a career coach. You give concise career advice, respond using markdown language. The user role is what you're used to typing in ChatGPT. So that's your question. So I'm an experienced Java developer. What can I do to achieve my career goals? Consider the provided career goals in your response. And then you see another header for career goals. And this is your data. The LLM doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know what you want. You have to tell it. So this is an example of bringing your own data. And I would encourage you, go home, get on ChatGPT, try this prompt, put in your career goals and see how this works. So those headings, those markdown headings, those are that's the attention mechanism. That's one of the attention mechanisms. So that's part of what attention is, what you need provided. So we've talked about system roles, telling the AI what you want it to do, how you want it to answer. We've talked about the user role, which you're all familiar with because that's what you've been typing in the ChatGPT all along. There's also an assistant role where you can connect the prompt that you're programming with Spring AI to a vector store. That's how you make it stateful. So if you want it to maintain context of a conversation, you could point it to a vector store and it can hold its state there, okay? Function roles I haven't messed with, but basically it's more details that you can give the LLM how to answer your question. Who's seen this before? Several people. It goes back to 2015. So what makes this all work are multidimensional arrays, vectors. And vectors have a direction. So if you have a vector store and you've trained it about royalty, you're going to have a vector for king, queen, prince, princess, duke, whatever. And you might have another set of vectors that end up there for human, male, female, etc. And they have direction. So the magic of AI is a similarity search that measures the distance between the vectors. So if you take the vector for king and you subtract the vector for man, you'll end up with, and you add in woman, you'll end up with queen. Of course, I haven't done this, but this is what I trust the MIT technical review. And likewise, if you take the capital Paris minus the country France plus the country Poland, you'll end up with the capital of Poland. So it's cool stuff. So what makes a good vector database? Where's all the math take place? So vector databases need to support multimodality. So you can have audio, video, images, text, code. They have to have great indexing to do that math fast. They need to support high dimension arrays. So, and we're talking, we've all done 2-dimensional arrays. Postgres can support, I think, 2096 dimension arrays. Just boggles the mind. Some of these models I've seen so far have been like 3,000, 4,000 dimensions. It's crazy. We are not going to be using one that's that big on this laptop. And they have to be scalable. And so how do you get the vectors? So you do that with embedding models, and there's embedding models. Maybe they're specific to an LLM. Maybe they're used by multiple LLMs. You choose from them. And you take chunks of data and put them in. So that might be words, sentences, paragraphs, pages of a PDF, pages of a presentation, however you have chunked that data down, and it gives you back these enormous multidimensional vectors. So OpenAI, ChatGPT, the embedding models that start with text, they come from there. The default embedding model is one called Text Embedding Ada 002. I don't remember where I got that small one from, but this is the size we'll be using tonight, a 384 dimension array. And all of you have use cases to do this, right? This is from ahead, but this could be any company. We handle client data. We have a policy, we're not allowed to send any client data to a public LLM. And that's probably going to be true universally. You don't want to share public data or client data on a public LLM or personal or private data. So in your organizations, you might have a sales group that has vast amount of marketing material. They want an efficient way to go get it. Well, vector databases do well with unstructured data, documents, presentations, that kind of thing. So you can put that in a vector database and do searches for it. We didn't build this part, but as a consultant, I would like to, if I'm on an engagement, I would like to know about similar solutions that have been built so I can do them quicker, do them better. It'd be nice to go search technical papers. As a resource manager, you might be trying to fill our staff and engagement, and you want to match it to personnel who have those skills. So in order to do that, since the LLM doesn't know about your company, you've got to bring your own data. And that's kind of what's pictured on the bottom there. You need a process to pull that unstructured data in, do the embedding, store it in a vector database. And then once you have that, you can build a workflow behind your prompt. So those prompts that we started out showing you guys, the user asks for something. We know the context, hopefully, because they told us or their UI collected it. You go to the vector store, which matches that request, do the search, pull back matching results, and then you can provide that to the LLM to do whatever it was they were asking. At Ahead, we are like the cobbler's children who have no shoes. Our people are out doing engagements. We don't get a lot of time. Nate, did you work on this or? Ben did that. Okay. Well, I knew Ben did, but I wasn't sure who else was involved. But we got some time together and did some of the things I had on the previous slide. And what we ran into was people wrote terrible prompts. They would type in, Azure. Well, are you looking for information about Azure, or are you looking for resources who know Azure? And we ended up adding the radio buttons so we knew which vector store to point them at. So that'll be a struggle that you all face as you embed these into your apps. All right, so why Spring AI? We're all going to have to do AI, right? So as users get used to natural language interfaces, they'll come to expect it, right? They're gonna want to search their unstructured data wherever the heck it is, and there's millions of apps written in languages other than Python. So Java developers need a way to do AI. .NET developers need a way to do AI, and that was the spirit behind Spring AI. And they looked at Llama Index and Llama Chain as their inspiration for creating this. And they're just trying to give you, as Java developers, a way to integrate AI features into your applications. I heard from the author of Spring AI in Action on Monday. He asked me to promote his book. He's got 4 chapters written so far. And we have a code It's 50% off if you get it by August 21st. But it's WL Walls 10. So if you are taking this AI train and you want to learn a little bit, that's a good way to do it. I wish now I would have had this a couple months ago because it has some good stuff. So the main thing that I took away from this is you don't have to be a data scientist to do AI. You're probably going to need some data engineers like these guys back here to help with sourcing that data and the ETL workflow and you know, to bring your own data. You're going to have to do some heavy lifting there. But as far as integrating it with your Spring Boot apps, you don't have to be a data scientist. So what we're going to do is step through some simple examples and kind of build into it. But I'm going to start with just talking to AI in the cloud. So this app that I referenced at the beginning has a massive README. I've tried to document everything as I go to make it easier to follow along and try things out. All right, so I was looking for this. So we're going to do two things tonight. One is talk to the AI in the cloud, which you can do today in a web browser, but we're going to do that in Spring. And then we're going to use Ollama to run it locally, talk to it locally. So I want to run this just to make a point. So I'm going to be going to GPT-4. And we're just going to ask it a joke. It doesn't matter what we do, really. I've already got that up there. Okay, so a joke came back. ChatGPT-4 using configurations in my app.yaml file and using a REST endpoint that talks to the chat client. We'll look at that in a second. Now, if I stop this and I change the Spring profile to be Grok, which this isn't Grok with a K like Elon Musk. This is Grok as in it's another LLM that is on OpenAI, or it actually uses the same API as OpenAPI, but yeah, it's different. So now same code, same Java code, but we're pointing to a different Spring profile. Cross your fingers, because when I did this earlier, they were down and it didn't come back, but we'll give that a shot. And there we go. I told my wife she was drawing her eyebrows too high. She looked surprised. So point being, the code didn't change. So this is what you're used to with Spring, switching from Postgres to MySQL or whatever else. It's abstracted away from you. So it's just another Spring integration, right? It's nothing, it's AI, but it's no big deal. You're used to JDBC and JPA and probably JMS and switching out implementations, maybe from what you do at your desktop to what you deploy to test. Hopefully you deploy the same backend for test, QA, and prod. But the point is, it's abstracted away and you can change things as you go. And that's what you're going to get with Spring AI. So they built it the same way they've done the rest. They use lots of abstractions. There's an abstract chat model interface and an abstract chat client interface. And then there's tons of implementations for all the different LLMs that it talks to. Because it's abstract, the chat client's portable, so you can switch like I just did. I went from GPT-4 to Grok. It supports multimodality, so it can take images and audio and text and code and all the rest and return it. It has a portable vector store, so that's no surprise, right? We've got Spring JPA and Spring JDBC. We're used to switching out databases. And of course, Spring AI does that. It does function calling, and I did not get to function calling, but this is Java util functions, and you can chain those together in a workflow around your prompts. So, you know, as I mentioned, with a heads attempted implementation, we tried to get fancy figuring out what they're asking for. So we knew what vector store to go to, and you can do that by chaining. In the Python world, they talk about chaining agents, but we have Spring util functions to do that. There's a function registry, it's declarative. And there's an ETL framework, and I think a Spring integration for that, but it's allows you to build these workflows that bring in your corporate data. So this is out of the reference implementation. What we'll see tonight is the bottom part, but before you can do the bottom part, you need to build your ETL. So what we'll see last, I pulled down Airbnb listings for Austin and embedded those, and we'll do a little search against those with the vector store. But I didn't do it right? So I should have done the functions and chained them together. So if you follow that GitHub repository, I'm going to continue on these examples. Famous last words. But we are doing this. So a request comes in, a query, we do a vector store similarity search, and we find those listings. We stuff them into the prompt along with what the user asked for, and we send that over to the LLM to build the answer and return it. So that's what we'll be doing last. And as far as workflows for the prompt process, there's a function registry, and you can build those handlers to get data they need to stuff into that prompt. You'll also see this used if you look at the model for Spring AI, the chat client. You'll see a bunch of classes, right, that talk to Ollama or local models. But when it comes to talking to OpenAPI or Azure or wherever else in the cloud you're going to talk to, they're using this internally, and they just have a function that receives that prompt and makes API calls. There's not a lot of code to it. It's just exercising the API of that AI model. And then back to the vector store, this has nothing to do with AI. This is really old. I just liked it because it helps you visualize the directionality of these vectors and how you can use distance to find similar vectors. And this is a list of what's supported today. So you'll recognize a lot of those databases, right? They're regular databases. They've added extensions that support vectors. The names you don't recognize, like Weaviate, there's newer dedicated vector databases. So that's a choice you're going to have to make what to use. I will say for the ahead one, we initially did that on AWS. I don't know what the decision rationale was. We ended up on Azure, so we're using Azure AI search for our vector store, and then a hosted open API on the for the model. And so thinking back to that prompt, I probably should have kept this slide closer to that prompt, where you had the system role and the user role, and then we were providing our goals, our career goals. This is what it looks like in Spring. So this looks like a request template or a JDBC template or anything else you do in Spring. It should look very familiar, and it should be easy to use. So we have an auto-wired chat client, and I'll show you how to make that bean, which has a prompt method. You can optionally pass the system, but you're going to use that user role to pass in what you're querying for. you call the LLM, and you get back the content. So there's a couple ways to do that, but it's super easy, super easy. Prompts can get complex, right? There's a whole career evolving of prompt engineer that, they're the whisperer. They know how to talk to the LLM and get what they want out of it. But you need a way to, you're not going to write these all on the fly, right? You're going to test and retest and perfect it for your data. And you can store those as a prompt template. And OpenAI or Spring AI is using string templates as their library. So it's the same string templates that you use with Spring MVC. So if you write Spring MVC views, this is the same thing, same syntax. So you would, and here we're showing we're instantiating a prompt template and just passing a string in, but in reality, you're probably going to have a template folder with a bunch of string templates, and you're going to pull those in as resources for the use case that your website's trying to satisfy. Once you've instantiated the prompt template, it has a create method, and you just pass in a map of key value pairs to satisfy the variables. And now your prompt is built. So you could go crazy writing these prompts. I will say one of the things you'll hear is meta prompts. So meta prompts is when you want to ask something, but you don't know how best to get it. So you can write a prompt to the LLM to help you write a prompt. And you'll pass in your best prompts, maybe things you've done before that work with your corporate data in the vector store you're going against, and get the prompts you want that way. So inception. All right, let's talk a little bit about Ollama. Again, think of it like VirtualBox for VMs or Docker desktop for containers. It's just a platform, and there's binaries for all the operating systems. There's a Docker one, which we're running here. It supports a ton of models. If you go out to the website, you can see what those are. For the Docker image, this is straight off their page. Let's talk about GPUs for a second. I have a 5-year-old MacBook, Intel MacBook, and I was running the Ollama Docker image on it with Llama 3. Ask me, tell me a joke, and it would take a minute. It was super slow. So a GPU helps the more sophisticated stuff you do, but you don't have to have it to get started with Spring API or Spring AI. And one way to think about it is you think about Tesla spending $10 billion for 50,000 H100 GPUs. That's for their training model, right? That's how you're going to train full self-driving. But in the car, you've got a $2,000 board that's your inference computer. So it drives the car with a small computer. So when you hear these big numbers, big compute numbers and all these GPUs, yes, you need that to train large models in a reasonable amount of time. But you, as a developer, as a consumer of one of these LLMs, you're going to need a GPU for your dev team, but you don't have to have it. And I will say, if you have a GPU, there's a little different command you got to use to launch it, so it knows about it. So if you think about that as a platform to run LLMs, when you fire it up, it doesn't do anything because it doesn't have a model loaded. So there's a CLI for Ollama called Ollama, and when you start Ollama, you have to shell into it and run Ollama run model name. And there's a package manager behind that. So it's gonna download that model. It takes a little bit of time. It's like doing a Docker pull. My experience has been it times out. If it times out on you, just run it again and it starts up immediately because you've already got the model. And it'll put you in this terminal mode. You can ask it some questions, make sure it's working, /buy, and it's up and going. And as long as you're using a persistent volume with your Docker container, it's going to be there each time you come back into it. All right, so let's run Ollama with Llama 3.1. So I'm using Maven profiles because I'm loading different dependencies depending on whether I'm talking to OpenAPI or talking to Ollama. And I'm using Spring profiles to pull in the properties that that model needs. And we'll take a look at that in a sec. But the default is running Ollama with Llama 3. So I can just do a regular Spring Boot run, not the long command that is a second ago. And what we'll notice is this should be slower. And it is. I can see the progress bar on there because I don't have a GPU. So at home, I've got some old lab computers and I bought cheap eBay boards up. I'll talk about that in a second. We got back the same joke, but so far we've hit Grok, we've hit OpenAPI, well, GPT-4, and we've hit Llama 3.1 running on Ollama, running on this laptop. And it was noticeably slower. I don't know how long that was, a couple seconds. Don't know where the jokes came from, but yeah, I don't know. Well, oh, the question is, why do two models give you the same dad joke? And the answer is probably they read the same book, right? They were trained in the same way. You do see well, especially with the same model, you'll get different jokes, but they cycle pretty often. So it's not that creative. Just depends on how it was trained. So yeah, this is what I ran into. If you go look for the hardware requirements for Llama 3, it'll tell you, well, let me back up a second. Why GPUs? Anybody know why GPUs? And why not CPUs? And lots of cores. Yeah. So video games, there's a lot of vector math going on and a lot of parallel processing going on, which is great for doing your video game, doing that screen. And NVIDIA has this CUDA library, which is a library for programming those parallel cores. And so what the GPU gives you is a way to do vector processing with large number of vectors in parallel. And that's why the GPU helps. So Llama 3, if you're going to run it, they recommend a 3000 series. There's a 4000 series out already, but a 3000 series with 16 gig of video RAM. But it also depends on your model size. So the number of parameters in the model, there's small models and big models. And when you go into a Llama, you pull down the model you want. You can pick what kind of model you think your hardware can handle. But the more you put on there, the bigger the processor you need. I know Ollama, I'm not sure. I know Ollama supports other GPUs, but I don't remember what GPU it is. I know they support 2. But if you look at the Ollama site, you can probably get that pretty quick. And if you want to run it in production, I mean, I think you're starting at like a $2,000 GPU at minimum. And then it just goes up from there, thousands and thousands of dollars. But I have 10-year-old workstations in my home lab. I'm not going to buy a $2,000 GPU to play around with Spring AI. So I went to eBay and I got a 1000 series GPU for 120 bucks. That's the one I talked about earlier. And it went from over a minute to around a second. So I don't know. I imagine there's a few people that have gaming computers at home. Maybe put them to use as your Ollama platform. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to put the project together. We're going to do a really simple project last from scratch, but this project that's up on GitHub has more stuff baked in, so you can try more things. And what I'm using PG Vector as my vector store. Who's used test containers for unit tests? Anybody? One? I use the test container. So if I, let me drop out of this. Let me bring up Docker. Let me bring up my unit tests. So if you look at Docker, this is new, right? As my tests run, it's spinning up a Docker container with Postgres in it and doing the test, and then it destroys the container. That's nice if you want to use a vector, because you can't do, if you probably use H2, right? When you do your unit tests, H2 doesn't have a vector store yet. I found one guy's library who he hacked it, put in a vector store, but you don't even have to do that because there is a in-memory vector store that comes with Spring AI. So I could have done that, but I wanted to use the same vector store for my unit test as I was doing in my production. This other thing you see, this is Docker Compose. So who's used the Docker Compose library in Spring AI? Got one in the back? Yep. Okay. Well, not with Spring AI, but just, Docker Compose. Oh, not built in. So there's a Docker Compose support library in Spring, and it looks for a Docker Compose XML or YAML file at the root of your project, and it'll fire it up. So we see, let me shut this down. So I have a Docker Compose file. It's got my Postgres vector database, and it has Ollama, and I've installed the model on Ollama. And if I come over to my project, and let me just fire it up again. And we go back to Docker. It's running. So that's what the Docker Compose support library in Spring gets you. Spring Boot. So yeah, I've got a Ollama and I have a Postgres PG vector database. So that's where you can go with this, right? You can do the test containers, you can do Docker Compose, you can run this all, spin it up when you want it, and then get rid of it when you're done. But let's see how quick you can just get a basic Spring AI project going. So all I'm doing, the easiest one to do, I don't have to mess with the vector store if I talk to OpenAI. So I'm pulling in OpenAI and I want an endpoint that I can hit. So well, let me step you through the slides and then we'll copy the things over. So pull down that project and set up your application properties. And there's a new property now called Spring AI. And you specify what you're doing. So Are you doing Ollama? Are you doing OpenAI? What model are you doing? So Spring AI, OpenAI, you need a key if you're going to talk to OpenAI. So I have a properties file that has all, I'm not going to leak my API keys here. I have a script that exports my properties. And it has my OpenAI, Grok, database stuff. And then you tell it what model you want. So you put these things in, and then Spring AI, when you do the chat client builder, it's going to read that and give you the appropriate implementation of the chat client for your target. And this is the builder. It's pretty darn easy, right? I just put a bean in a class, and chat client is on the class path. Get the builder, do a build. It reads your properties. You have a chat client. And then you just need to use it. So this is what we saw a little bit ago, talking about a prompt. So I have a REST controller. I'm auto wiring the chat client. I have an endpoint. I use the chat client prompt. I give it a message, which I can pass in. And I call the LLM and I get back the response. And that's all it takes to get started. So how are we doing on time? Okay. So let's do that. All right, so this is straight out of Spring Initializer, right? I asked for OpenAI, I asked for web, and that's all I asked for. Unzipped it, I copied in my environment file, and I'm going to rename my application properties to be YAML. Okay. And we'll go back to my slide. And I'm going to copy this. All right, so I've got my properties. I will create a class. I'm just going to call it config. Go back to my slides. All right, so now I've got my bean. All right, that looks good. And my REST endpoint, I just called chat controller. All right. Grab this. All right, so that's all we've done. Properties, bean, REST endpoint. Now to try this out, I need to import my stuff. All right, so now I've got my API key in the environment. And I'll do a Maven Spring Boot run. All right, it's up. And this is just the root. So I'm gonna say, I didn't give it a default value. So I'm gonna say, tell me a dad joke. And is it done already? Wow, okay. I didn't expect that. So yeah, but 5 minutes, right? Of course, you can go to the ChatGPT webpage and do that without having to pull it into Spring, but that's where you start, right? Got to start somewhere, and that's how easy it is to start. All right, so now let's do, let me go back. Let's take it up a notch. So I told you about that Airbnb listing CSV, so let's go have a look at that. Airbnb, so this is going to be straight up, I can close. Yeah, I can close that. All right, so I have let's see, not under test data. Okay, so under resource data, I've got 15,000 Airbnb listings from Austin. I wrote, didn't have Spring AI in action at the time, and I forced my way through this import. I could have done ETL and used functions, and that'll be my next attempt at this. But fine, this is an 80 column table, lots of indexes. Probably not a great candidate for AI, but I found a use for it, and that's what we're going to demo. And the challenge was for me, how to embed it. I didn't know how to embed it. I was getting errors that had the wrong number of dimensions on my vector store, or what embedding model do I use? I kept looking at Llama 3, and anyway, eventually on the Ollama site, I found it supports 3 embedded models, and there's a small, medium, and large. So what I needed to do was go into the application properties and do 2 things. About halfway down there, on line 35, you see embedding. So I had to expand my application properties and say, I'd like to do some embeddings, and I'd like to use that model. I think I did show that earlier. So that was step 1. And then step 2 was, when I ran it, I got all kinds of errors because the dimensions in my vector store didn't match the dimensions in my embedding model. So I had to go back and change the vector store to have 384 dimensions. And I dropped the vector store table, and that's all I had to do. When I started Spring Boot back up, it automatically recreated the vector store based on my application properties. So now I have an embedding model, I have a place to put stuff. And once you get that done, it's not so hard. So my loader, I'm loading 250 records at a time out of that CSV file, and I'm putting them in PG vector table, listing table. And then I pass that same 250 listings here, and I'm streaming those in a parallel stream, and I'm creating a Spring AI document. And the main thing about the Spring AI document is the first parameter. That's what's gonna, the content, that's what's gonna be embedded. So I just took the listing name and the listing description, and that's what I'm turning into a vector. You can also add metadata, which I did, and I'm not using it. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't help you with similarity match or any of that. But if you have a workflow where you're pulling back these vector similar matches and you have that metadata, you can do things like build a URL to go dig into the 80 column row in the database or whatever else you need to do. So you can hold some metadata in there, but it's for your purposes. It's not, doesn't help the embedding. And then below that, I'm using a bean I set up with no parameters, which is a token text splitter, and that's doing the chunks. So you need to break your content that you're gonna embed into chunks. And uh, Spring is opinionated, and it figured this out. It breaks each one into 2 chunks. Don't know how. I am using a colon when I put in the name and the description. So my guess is, I haven't tried taking that out, but my guess is it's use that as a delimiter, but 2 chunks per listing. And then we just have to add it to the vector store. That's it. We've created vectors. First time you start this up, I think I mentioned, it runs for about an hour because it's importing. Doesn't take that long to pull in 15,000 records, but it takes a long time with no GPU to create all the embeddings. So when we're done, let me see if I'm still running. No. If I go into the vector store, and let's just grab 10 records. So what you get is UUID, the content. So this is the name and the description, or actually, yeah, name and description. And you don't see the embedding. There we go. This is the metadata, which you could use however you want, right? That's for you. And then here's the embedding. So this goes on forever, 384 dimension vector per description. Shoot, I meant to, takes 2 minutes to find this match, but so I'm gonna get this match kicked off and then we're gonna go look at what I did with this. Oh, there we go. So what I'm gonna do, I showed you the template that takes the user and the listings. And then I wrote an Airbnb controller. So what we're going to do is we're helping hosts write better descriptions for their listings. So we're going to take the listing they tried, and we're going to search, we're going to do a vector search, and we're going to pull back the results, and we're going to use the large language model to write it for them better. So let me fire this up. Okay. And I'm going to go to here and I'm pasting in prompt stuffing, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, close to downtown Austin. That's as creative as I could be as a host when I wrote up my listing. I'm going to submit that. It's going to take 2 minutes and we're going to go look what happens. So I am dumping out the vector search. So if you recall, the prompt came in, we did a similarity search against their vector database, and we got back listings that matched. So if I look down this list, I see a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. This is the highest match, $96 a night. I see another 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I see a 6-bedroom, 4-bath for 106. So it got about 5 results. And should be here because I could see it in the logs. We're going to give it a second. Well, let's.
Recommend having a secondary this rather than on the primary machine while you're working.
That's what I'm doing at my home lab. I have a rack and I've got, I put that GPU in a 10-year-old dual Xeon Z620, this big ancient workstation. And now it has a GPU and it's fast. I haven't run this on it. We'll see. But so this was created out of thin air, right? Let me show you one thing first. In my prompt, I said, you work for Airbnb, you help hosts write better descriptions for their Airbnb listings, rewrite the user's Airbnb description using the information provided in their prompt. Do not change the bathrooms and bedrooms. It was doing that at first. I don't want it to change that. Okay. Yeah, you'd charge a lot more. Rewrite the user's description. Consider similar descriptions in the listing section. So remember, our template had a user prompt and it had a listing section. So I passed those in. And yeah, so we got back, it's now a cozy 2-bedroom, 2-bath, downtown Austin, perfect blend of comfort, yada, yada, yada. So that's an example of using a large language model to create output for you. So maybe it's, you've got your HR policy in there and you say, is it okay if I work in Mexico for 2 weeks? What's our policy on remote work? And yeah, perhaps it could be used for something like that. And yeah, so that's all the demo I have.
Looks like you got 3 different responses, same line. Looks like you rewrote it 3 times. Not sure though.
Oh,
If you look at the text, up there, it repeats number back.
oh, it does. Yeah, very possibly. Yeah. No, I think that had to do with the number of results. So yeah, no, I didn't read all the way through it. So that's where you go back to your prompt and give it more instructions. I did ask the AI when I should use AI, and this was what it said. It's a sum of what it said. It was pretty verbose, but yeah, complex, unstructured data is the best use case. If you've got SQL that works well, use SQL. But if you build one of these solutions, it's flexible and you can change the data that's coming in, chunk it differently, change your prompt, whatever it needs. We're all going to be doing it. So now Deshaun's buddy, I don't know if you've seen any of their webcasts or whatever they're called. Dan Vega, he's got a playlist of 10 videos that's worth having a look. And yeah, that's all I've got. Did you want me to go back to the? Sure thing. All right. Thanks for having me. There's still some water bottles and pens and pads over there. Help yourself. And yeah, appreciate you coming in here. Thanks. Oh, you're gonna do a raffle. Do you want to switch to yours?
All right, well, thank you very much. And if you could flip yours off here so we don't have two mics echoing. We'll stop the recording and see if we can start the raffle.